Oprah, Oprah. You know, I do miss lazy teenage afternoons when I'd come home from school, flop on the sofa, and watch some Oprah. Hello, I am back looking through another Best Books of 2023 list, and this comes from the queen of book clubs herself. Well, actually not from her, but from the editors at Oprah Daily. They've published their top 10 books of the year. So I'm gonna look through these titles, give brief overviews and summaries of them, if I have any thoughts or feelings about them, if I want to read them or not. And they've published some other lists as well, and I'm gonna pick and choose some of these other titles. Some of these books have been appearing on multiple people's selections when picking their best books of the year, and I always think that that is a sign that there is something really special about these particular titles, and I should probably read them. First off, there is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim, which is about a tight-knit Korean-American family when the husband and father goes missing and the younger brother returns bloodied, and he has a condition in which he can't speak. So they go on a quest to try to discover what happened to the father, and it's a mystery, it's a family drama, and it's a philosophical inquiry into what holds us together. So I have been wanting to read this author. I have her previous novel, Miracle Creek, which has been sitting on my shelves for ages. So yeah, I want to read this and then get to her new novel. Absolution by Alice McDermott. This is about two women who meet in Saigon in the early 1960s with the backdrop of the Vietnam War, and it explores their private suffering but also the good that they tried to do, and it follows their story through till decades later when they reunite and re-examine what happened in the past and about this quest they had to do inconsequential good. A number of years ago, I read Alice McDermott's novel, The Ninth Hour, which I absolutely loved. I thought it was such an emotional and powerful book, and which also explores these themes about what makes us good people and what can we really do to help change the world around us. She's such an excellent writer, so I'm really eager to read this new book of hers. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This is a novel that specifically centers around a parentless boy in the early 20th century in a small town in Pennsylvania, but also more broadly about a number of individuals in this community who live on the margins and the adversity they face, but how they forge connections through friendship and love. Lucky Dogs by Helen Schulman. This is about two women who meet and form a kind of alliance. On the surface, their lives appear to be very fortunate, but they've both suffered from misogyny and male violence. So we follow their thrilling stories of survival, but also how they've been warped by the brutality they've experienced in their lives. The Last Animal by Ramona Ausubel. This is a novel about a woman who's a scientist and a mother. She goes on a research trip to Siberia and brings her daughters with her, and she's on this quest to try to de-extinct the woolly mammoth, and she discovers an entire baby woolly mammoth that's been preserved in ice, and this discovery leads her into conflict with her colleagues and goes on an entire journey alongside her daughters. It sounds like such a playful and fun story. I'm so intrigued by this. The next book is from Ayana Mathis, who had a former Oprah's Book Club choice. Her new novel is called The Unsettled. It's about a woman and her 10-year-old son who must move into a family shelter in Philadelphia in the 1980s. And it's about their struggle, but also why they were forced to leave the small town in Alabama that they came from. Death Valley by Melissa Broder. This is a novel about a woman who has a lot of sorrow in her life. A lot of the people that are closest to her are suffering from really severe illnesses. She sets out by herself in the desert and there discovers a very strange cactus, which she finds a door in, which leads her on a mystical journey. It sounds quite wild and imaginative. I've read Melissa Broder's novel The Pisces before, which I really enjoyed. And though this novel sounds I think quite whimsical, it also is meant to explore grief in a really profound way. Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. This is a great big family saga and crime thriller that centers around a disastrous event and the people involved with it. There's a Playboy heir, there's a female journalist, and there's a boy who is born into poverty who finds himself at the center of it. I've heard very mixed things about this book, that it is quite compelling and gripping, but also slightly uneven in places. So I'm very intrigued by it, but I don't know if I'll find the time to actually read this great big long novel. Fireworks Every Night by Beth Raymer. This is a tumultuous coming-of-age tale about a girl growing up in Florida whose parents are going off the rails. They're struggling with issues to do with addiction and mental illness, and this girl is just trying to survive. And though this sounds like it has quite serious themes about it, it's meant to have a lot of humor and poignancy as well. So I think it sounds really compelling. And I'd not heard of it before this, so this is one of the reasons why I love looking through these lists. It introduces me to new titles that I might not have come across otherwise. And finally, on this top 10 list, there is The Fraud by Zadie Smith, which is told through the point of view of a character named Eliza, who in the mid-19th century in England is a housemaid to a historical novelist. But she is so much more than that. She's an abolitionist. She's a very intelligent woman who also moves in these literary circles that also involves Charles Dickens, and she's an assistant to this historical novelist. She also becomes very compelled by a famous trial that was going on at the time, and how this touches upon the history of the end of slavery in Jamaica and a man she meets who's connected with this case. Now, there is a lot going on in this novel. I understand why some readers have found it slightly uneven, but I found the story so compelling and enjoyable. But it's also a novel I've continued to think about after reading it, in what it says about our relationship and understanding of history, between history and fact and fiction. Oprah Daily also published a list of some of the best short story collections from the past year, and they included in that So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. Now, somewhat confusingly, here in the UK, this has been published on its own as a brand new short story, which is about misogyny from the inside, following a character and his breakup with a woman that he had intended to marry. But in the US, this has been published as a collection and includes 2 other short stories. And I wasn't sure at first if these stories had been published before or not. And recently I saw Matthew Sharapa reviewed the US edition of this on his Instagram, and so I was asking him about it. And so the stories that are included in the US edition had appeared in previous collections of Claire Keegan's, both from Antarctica and from Walk the Blue Fields. The very first story in this collection appeared in the US edition of this. But Claire Keegan is such an excellent writer. I would highly recommend reading her in whatever edition of her books you can find. Oprah's Daily also have a list of some of the best books from the past year that you may have missed. And one book on that list that I didn't miss is Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. I loved reading this novel. It is one of my favorite books from the past year. It's about a woman who moves from Australia to an elite boarding school for girls, who becomes a matron there, and she also becomes romantically infatuated with the headmaster's wife. And we follow that very complicated relationship, and the atmosphere of this story and the way it explores desire and the central character's relationship with her own body and her sexuality is so powerful. I think this book is just incredible. So those are all the books I want to talk about. Let me know if you have read any of these titles and what you think about them in the comments below, or if you're interested in reading them now. I hope you're doing well and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.